Our next presenter is Lawson Bracewell from New Zealand and originally from America. And he's been in the esoteric field a long time and one of the most active astrologers, traveling all over the world, doing astrological charts for so many people, able to talk to so many people in a way that is meaningful to them. So I suppose Lawson will be speaking out of his own experience, which is usually the case for Lawson. And he's, excuse me, going to be speaking on the humble yet powerful sextile. I think someone said about the Dalai Lama's chart, how it's filled with sextiles. It is. Nietzsche's chart was filled with sextiles, a very integrative pattern. So while he's being wired up there, is this part of your presentation, Lawson, or is this just what time it is? Oh, okay, so the humble yet powerful sextile, Lawson's presentation.
Thank you. What I feel like is we've just had the sun.
Thank you.
BL has presented you with a star, a whole system, and it's amazing. And now I'm coming on to present you either with the metaphor of a grain of sand, or she's presented you with the ocean, and I'm going to present you with a drop. Now, there's a link between the ocean and the drop, and there's a link between the star and the grain of sand, and it's a dynamic link. So although, in the title of this, the sextile is this very humble little grain of sand, or very humble little drop of water, if we look at the core of the sand, there is the fiery essence at the very core of it. It is a direct response to the energy of the sun descending into the dense worlds. And, we've known, according to Mr. Emoto, what water at a great spiritual level can convey, even a drop of water. So, I started in terms of thinking about this moment in time in which I would stand naked before you without a clue as to what was going to happen next, and began to wonder, where I was going to go and where I was going to end up and what was going to actually be involved in this talk. And so I started, it's a sixth ray conference. So divide the circle into 6 pieces, and you come up with a sextile. So sextiles will be my conversation in this. And then I thought, do I have any sextiles in my chart? And I went, yes, I do. And I began to ponder upon, the reality of that in my life. And so really that's just the background for what I'm going to share with you. My digging into why is this sextile significant? How does it relate to the sixth or the sixth ray? And how does it turn from something that is very insignificant into something that's very significant? So first of all, in terms of the sixth ray, we have so many dynamic words and images associated with the sixth ray. If you look in the back of your program, it lists the ray lord names for the sixth ray, and, the implacable one upon the ray, the destroyer of forms, the great liberator, all of this, that's the sixth ray, and that's what we think of. And, in this time when the sixth ray is incredibly powerful because it's going out, we're seeing the embodiment of this energy in terms of those who are on the jihad on a form level, and they're just immolating themselves and immolating others because of this, sense of approaching divinity and burning up all the forms on the route to it. So I thought, this is sort of a dead end. My humble little sextile has a real hard time living up to that. So then I went and I thought, are there other characteristics of the sixth ray? Well, fortunately there are. Humility. Profound humility. I am so much identified with every other grain of sand, with every other expression of divinity, that I can let go of myself and just be present in a totally spiritualized environment. That's, humility. Sincerity. Just speaking from the heart without any intention to impress or, dazzle with a lot of unique perspectives. Or purity. There's just the stripping away of all non-essentials and being free from all that might distract. Simplicity. These are all sixth ray characteristics. And I think in the example that someone evoked, the Dalai Lama earlier, we have a really powerful example of all of those more humble characteristics of the sixth ray. And then it takes us into, well, how does that express in the world? Well, an atomic bomb. That's the Dalai Lama. This humble little person that comes along, bearing all these humble sixth ray characteristics. But literally, he irradiates the planet with the living presence of compassion. Wow. Coming at it from a way that is not ordinarily seen as the fiery energy of the sixth ray. So then I thought, well, what is the symbol for the sextile? If you look in your chart, the way that you find a sextile is you see a star on it. A six-pointed star is the symbol for a sextile. Well, earlier, BL put up here one of these lovely Star of David patterns where you've got sextiles all the way around. This is the star. This is the symbol of consciousness. This is a symbol of that middle state where we realize that we stand at the midway point. What is idealism but the midway point? What is the soul but the midway point? What is the soul but consciousness, idealism? It's transitory. Our ideals are all transitory, but they're vehicles. They're incredible vehicles from getting from here to there. And they're full of fire. Our ideals, our souls are full of fire. Our consciousness is fiery energy. And it's idealism, and it's taking us somewhere, and it's transitory. Then, lost my little thread, find it again somewhere. Yeah, I'm sextiles and stars and, all of that. But I think I sort of came to the end of whatever it was that I was thinking there and then shifted into, well, one of the things that I'm experiencing in my life is how to accelerate the process of consciousness in my life. So I want to give you some background on a psychological term, which, in the days when I was a social worker and immersed in, a related but quite different field from astrology, one of the most intriguing concepts was the concept of projection. And the concept of projection is the idea that you find something in your environment. It can be a person, it can be an idea, it can be a situation, and you say, this I am absolutely at odds with. This something is not me. And I I am determined to oppose it, to point out its failings, its flaws, its inconsistencies. I'm really defining myself through saying, I am not that. And one of the things that I always found when I was immersed in this field in which people picked up on the concept of projection, there was something bad about it. You're projecting, they would say. You're just projecting. Bad, you'll grow out of this, You won't do this anymore after a while. Well, I think, in fact, the concept of projection, as it was presented by whatever philosophical, psychological thinker brought it up, and my roots are too dried up in terms of knowing which personage did this, brought it out into public consciousness. But whatever that was, it was a stunning idea in terms of spiritual evolution, or evolution on any level. Because, of course, the nature of reality that we live in is dualistic. We come from a point. We come from a unity. We come from one. But in order to understand ourselves, we choose, out of desire, to separate into two-ness. And that's our whole journey. Of course, we can break it down into all these other patterns, numbers, harmonics. But the basic is we split ourselves into two-ness. We create an opposition, which is one of the most dynamic aspects that you can find in your chart, because it's the aspect of projection. If you have an opposition in your chart, you are always going to be looking for somebody, something to polarize with. That's not bad. That's good, as long as you know what you're doing. If it's just blind, and of course that's where we all began. We all just began by stumbling in the dark. We bump into something and we say, ooh, that hurts. Can't see it, but I've just stubbed my toe, that hurts. And we complain about it even though we don't understand it. Increasingly the light becomes brighter and we begin to see what we've just stumbled into. And now we describe it and we say, that is exact, it has a sharp edge and that's why, I'm hurting, And, eventually we go, aha, I have a sharp edge. I have a sharp edge. And that's why I'm hurting. Am I hurting? Why am I hurting? What's hurting? So the whole process of projection eventually takes us back to ourself, because we come to see that it was perfect. Whatever it was that we've polarized with is now presenting us with a mirror, a perfect mirror of something that we're trying to integrate, bringing back to ourself, that has temporarily been displaced from ourselves, and now we're whole again. Now that's the dynamic of projection. Now, within the sextile, that opportunity is there. BL was presenting a very big picture, so she buzzed across the sextile. But you heard her several times using the buzzword for sextile, which is opportunity. That's about all. I did one of my little processes of getting here is I did a rummage through all the various astrologers who've written books, the cookbook type things, where they say, this is what a sextile is. Well, it's a pretty dismal, I can tell you, it's a pretty dismal field to go into. You think you're going to find something, and you get there, and it's an illumined mind, some great astrologer. And they say something like, it's a lazy aspect. It's an opportunity waiting for you to apply will. You know, it's a minor aspect. It has to do with latent talents, you know, and you just go, oh, well, yeah, so, help. That's no help, what it's saying. And so, all right, I thought, the key here is that idea that there's an opportunity, but it requires the use of the will to make it be something. Now, isn't that an interesting concept? Because in terms of our field, we say that there comes a certain point in the progressive life of an evolving soul in which the will must be evoked. You know? First initiation. Humanity is facing the first initiation. Many of us in the room have taken the first initiation. A touch of the will happens at that point in time. That's what puts us upon the path of discipleship. Because there is that activation of this opportunity, this latent opportunity, which we've been building, honing, developing, but it's the will that goes, aha, the juice is on. So, now I just remembered a bit that was earlier that I didn't remember. So I want to come back to that. You know, the bit is, there's a nice thing that you can do in terms of describing the nature of any one of these aspects. So, with a sextile, it's a 60-degree, or it involves two signs. In other words, because it's 60 degrees, it spans two signs, like all of Aries, all of Taurus. You know, that's a 60-degree chunk of space, chunk of the circle. It describes a sextile. If you want to describe any sextile, of course, we all have different kinds because of the planets that are involved, or the houses that are involved, or the bigger pattern that it's involved in. But if you want to just describe any sextile generically, you say, well, two signs away from the 0 point of Aries is Gemini. In the other direction, two signs away is Aquarius. So you can say that all sextiles have the characteristics of Gemini and Aquarius. So in terms of Gemini, the characteristic is a very fluid openness to ideas and communication and social contact. On the higher level, this has to do with the building of that link of communication, which we call the antakarana, which seeks to find the middle way, that which fuses and unifies the apparent division that we have between form and spirit itself. Or in Aquarius, we have the kind of openness to unusual people, unusual ideas, you know, a willingness to entertain and not make judgments, a whole orientation to group social contact, and we could say on another level, finding our true group, which we might say is the new group of world servers. So there's a lot in the sextile in terms of the potential of those two signs. All right, so then I said to myself, all right, how is it then, if we activate the will in order to make use of the opportunity? By the way, what does the word opportunity immediately evoke in you? Saturn, that is correct.
Right.
Thank you. We always get this thing, you know, like Saturn, the planet of, you know, crisis and initiation and all of these things, which often in mundane terms are seen as negative. And then we're always, when we're brought into the path of discipleship, you're always buttered up with the word opportunity. You know, don't get carried away with your suffering. You know, it's all for a purpose. The bigger the crisis, the happier you should be. You know, all of these sorts of things. All right. So That sense of opportunity and its connection to Saturn ties us into two important numbers. One is a 6 is associated with threeness. You know, there are two triangles involved in it, and Saturn is a conveyor of the third ray. So we have in this sense of sextile the potential for bringing the intelligence, this interlocking network of light, into expression in the sextile. But there's another number which is equally important, and that is the 2. And in fact, I think in some ways, the 2 is a stronger number for describing the influence of the sextile than is the 3. If you look at the planes, the 6th plane is the 2nd plane. The 2nd plane is the 6th plane. It depends on where you're counting from. They have a tremendous relationship with each other. They have this sense of duality apparent in both of them, and so they both entertain this split with the potential of a middle principle, desire to unify that which has become separate. Now, activating the will in order to make a sextile emerge out of its opportunity or its potential. Well, you simply choose to look at projection. Now, in the humble sextile, that doesn't appear to be what's happening. It appears to be happening in the opposition, yes. So you have to get inside the humble sextile and listen to the chatter. Yeah. And if you listen and you choose not to ignore it, now the temptation is to ignore it because it's so nice, because sextiles are very two-y, they're nice, The sextile is where we're the nicest that we can possibly be, We're gentle and humble and sincere and pure, all those things. But we have this concept of the shadow. Now, the shadow is, of course, that part of our personality which is resisting the return to unity. And as we progress along the path, the resistance grows stronger. It watches its noble fellow prisoners who it has been fighting and resisting alongside, dropping by the way. They've been falling prey to the soul and the monad. They've been swept up into love. And so, these parts of the personality retreat deeper and deeper into the shadows and build within themselves, growing very strong and fierce, charming and ugly at the same time. So, you have to look closely in the sextile. And then you have to claim them. You have to be willing to bring them out. So, I'm going to be the lunatic that I am. So, I have an exact sextile. In other words, I have the moon at 29 degrees of Scorpio in the 2nd house of the chart, and I have Neptune at 29 degrees of Virgo in the 11th house. So, this is something that BL touched on, I think, which is that aspects, as they become closer, become more powerful. So when you have a sextile and they are in the exact same degree, you have a very powerful opportunity. Yes. It's a well-integrated opportunity. All right? So, 2 planets. Here I am. I'm the moon. And, you know, in the nature of what I am, in the 2nd house and in the sign of Scorpio, I am very grounded. I mean, if you could see me in my daily life, in my work clothes, my torn jeans, my paint-spattered shirt, this is my daily gear. This is my kit, as we say in New Zealand. And I've got a chainsaw. It's a well-ordered, well-sharpened chainsaw. And I've got a gardening program completely. I know every gorse bush on the property. You know, this is my moon in the 2nd house. And, you know, I'm a simpleton. I mean, if you walked into that reality, I could be a peasant in Bangkok just as easily as the director of Christ College. I'm Neptune in the 11th house. Well, I hang out with some pretty special people. You know? You guys are all my friends. Incredible group. Amazing. Knowing you, I feel so humble. I just want to reflect back, you know, how sensitive, how spiritual, how intuitive, how loving, how compassionate you are. I just want to appreciate what you do. You know, the fact that you are actually able to hold that whole situation together, you know, whether it's just the daily finances of running Christ College, you know, you pull in little pennies out of nowhere, and you make it all work on a string and a breath and a faith, you know. I think you're amazing. I really feel like I can love you. I feel like I can let down all my fears of, you know, coming from my own particular little Midwest reality, you know. When I'm with you, I feel like it's all forgiven. And, you know, I'm just able to be me and find no resistance. You give yourself completely. It's fantastic. You sacrifice everything that you are. You separate it from all the non-essentials. Wow, I remember in the new group of World Servers Week, you were right there. You were touching every single person in the group. That was what you were doing continuously. Amazing, amazing. That's all the lovely stuff. You know, that's all the lovely, nice stuff, and I can just wallow in that forever. That's so nice. Not much is happening, but, you know, that's really nice. Here's what I see when I look inside of it. You flake. You know, you're not even on the planet. Yeah. The 6th ray, what a joke. You know, like, where is that getting you? The 2nd ray is all that matters. And all I see is your continuous devotion to things that are not really manifesting. I mean, they might be true, but, you know, in the day-to-day reality that we live in, I mean, look at, we've got gorse to chop, we've got a garden to dig. You're dreaming somewhere, you know, sitting in that temple. Let's talk about sitting in that temple. I mean, who's to prove that anything is happening? Sometimes I think you're asleep when you're in that temple. Sure, on the outside it looks like you're in deep, deep meditation, I think you're probably off with the Tweeties a lot of the time. Just imagining all of these fantastic connections that you're having. You are so screwed up. You think that just because you've got an advanced degree in psychology, you have done the work? No. You found a million very inventive ways of escaping your own neurosis and projecting it onto others. You, in a lot of ways, are just sucking energy that kind of friendship I can do without. Where are you when I need you? The bill is being paid, they've got an account here, and tomorrow if we don't pay, they're turning off the electricity. And you say you're a member of my group. You say that you are a member of the new group of world servers. Well, are you paying the bill? No, you're off with the Tweeties. You're funding something else. Or you're not even thinking about the bill, much less funding something else. You're preoccupied with the most trivial things. I mean, like a new chicken coop. What does that have to do with world service? You're trying to figure out whether or not you're going to buy red chickens that are going to lay beige eggs or white chickens that are going to lay white eggs. Well, now that I've gotten him out of his comfort zone and listened to these little conversations, of course, that nobody else gets to hear, and of course he doesn't pay much attention to either because they're sort of embarrassing. You know, and you know, it's easy to say, well, they're just tiny little conversations. They're not really of any great significance. I'm forced to say, how do I bring that projection into me? How do I stand in my potential? And the potential there was hinted at in the good stuff. You know, like in that good stuff that I was doing, there was this thing about the new group of World Servers Week, which is, you know, in one way, it's ancient history. It happened at the end of December. You know? Yeah, sure. It was an atomic bomb. We're all absolutely vibrating in its energy. You know? We're swept with it. We're, you know, there's a great cohesion occurring. We're all in crisis because of it. You know, this is a major event. I experienced that. But what if I was to experience that all the time, as strongly as I experienced it in 1 week? What if I chose to make it as intense as that all the time? Well, then that little humble sextile would not be a little humble sextile. It wouldn't be just the ordinary meaning of humility or purity. It wouldn't just be the sense of, you know, friendship and interconnection. I wouldn't be just a nice person to know. but I would be fully positioned in the group with group consciousness. So all of you have sextiles in your chart. Now, some of them are very dynamic. In other words, they're exact. Some of them involve contacts between two planets, and that's definitely better, or at least more powerful, than if it's an asteroid or a point. But the virtue of astrology is that if you don't see it, you can find it. Because we can always add more points. You can always put more things in, and that, although can be a silly exercise, all points have power. They're all expressions of divinity. You can work with any one of them in order to bring out something that is incredibly dynamic in terms of promoting consciousness. Well, I don't know. Seems like I'm sort of at the end of it. But I have no idea what the time is, and I invite you to ask me questions or make comments. Yes?
I'm still a little fuzzy on what happened to the shadow.
All right. Well, the shadow, first of all, is acknowledged. So it's brought out, and I see it then. I see it, first of all, because I listen to what I'm saying about others. And I say, aha, if I'm saying, if one of my criticisms is, this person is a flake, well, I'm a flake. Now, what does it mean? Then I go into dialogue with this, all right, so I'm imagining the person says to me, all right, you're saying I'm a flake. What do you mean? What's a flake? I don't get that. I have never heard of that word before. What are you talking about, flake? And so I say, well, for me, flake means that the person is just living in a kind of imaginary world. When you depend on them, they're not there. They're shifty. They're just not useful. That's a flake. And then I have to find the place inside myself. Obviously, it's not an all-pervasive me. It's actually quite a small part of me. But I go into it, and I say, that's me. And for a moment, I exaggerate it. I make it big. Now, of course, the danger in that moment is to fall prey to that then, to fall into the shadow and to think, well, now that's all of me. Or to have it be so big that I recoil all the way away from it and again go into denial with it. So I have to claim it, find the part of me that is operating like a flake, and say, well, within that, there is a counterpoint. What's the counterpoint to flake? Because every opposition, every opposite thing has the other in it. So what's the opposite of flake? Well, it's someone who is absolutely dedicated. They're implacable in their orientation to the fulfillment of an ideal. They're the practical visionary. That's the opposite. So whenever now I see the little inner voice going, that's a flake, I immediately go to me rather than staying there, although I pause long enough to get really clear about how flaky that is. And then I take it to me and say, thank you. This is me. Find the flake, stand in it, and at its essence, it has the reverse. It has the empowering, ideal-making, grounding, bridging energy that I now am standing in.
You choose then to identify with
That's
that
right.
higher
Yes,
energy.
that's right. Because the flake was just the vehicle to get me there. I don't want to stay with the flake. You know, I want to say, all right, that's a weak position right here. I've essentially said in all my projections there around the flake, you're a weak, inadequate person. So now I'm addressing a part of myself that is in a weakened state. It's only finding that out there in order to connect with whatever is keeping me temporarily in a weakened state. I have to find out what's at the center of that. In any weak field, there's tremendous strength. So I want to go to that. Then the weakness vanishes and the radiance appears. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Until someone answers a question, you don't realize how vague you are. Yeah. Yes.
Lawson, what about sixth ray and projection? Do
Yeah.
you think there's a tendency
Absolutely,
there to do more
I
of
do.
it?
Yeah.
Why do you think it is so?
Well, because of that sense of two-ness that is within the sixth ray, you know? You've got that analogy of the planes that I used. So you're down on the emotional plane, and there's that duality between the higher emotions and the lower emotions. You've got an automatic projection between Neptune and Mars, you know, and one is apparently strong, the other is apparently weak. But looked at it, you realize, aha, that which is weak is strong. That which is strong is weak. You know, there is that continuous oscillation, which projection is all about.
I've sometimes thought that sixth ray types have not found their center
Yeah.
and are not willing to reclaim
Yeah.
what is in them and is recognized in the other. In other
Yeah.
words, they don't do the loop.
That's right.
They don't bring it back in.
Yeah.
In other words, God is there, and God is not
That's
here.
right. Yeah, that's right. And I think that it's wonderfully presented to us by the monad on the second plane. Because here you have the symbol of duality. It's on the second plane, but you have a unified field. And so that's the sixth ray. I mean, it's the potential within the sixth ray is to move to a place of recognizing that at the center of all things, there is the one life.
And that is hard. There is a concluding mantra in one of the sixth ray paragraphs that says, I am the seeker and the sought. I rest. And the fact is that for so long, the seeker does not know he is the sought.
Yeah, that's right.
That seems to
running
be
hither and thither,
Yeah.
pursuing with great,
Fervor.
zeal and fervor, the one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and of course, I also like that example where the guru says, you know, if you ever, or the teacher says, if you ever find the master upon the path, kill him. You know, and it is that same thing that if you are going to continuously chase after the master and identify, it will never end. So only if you stop the projection and have to stand alone with yourself and admit, I am both that which seeks and that which is sought, is the projection ended, and we move back through the process to unification. Yeah. They
Can you
must
hear
have
me?
to- there you
Okay.
go.
I just want to underscore how the sixth ray does the projection. See, the sixth ray is always looking for what's outside of
Yeah.
themselves, out there. So it's very transcendent. It's what is not in matter. Hence,
Yeah.
it's not in me.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
there.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
Very
very,
good.
very easy
Yeah.
for sixth ray
Yeah.
to project.
that's right. Yeah. Thanks.
I think that
Yes.
there's also, the projection relates
Wait.
to the idealization of something outside of oneself, you know,
Yeah.
kind of the romanticized version of ideals out there.
That's right. You know,
So
it's a bit like that. The ideal is at a midway point. It's a bridge. It's something close to something which I don't know, can't see, is invisible. And that's very challenging. You know, like the monad is symbolized by black, so no light. All that we have is an ideal which is illuminated by spotlights at the center of it. And so that's what we want. We don't know that we want the very thing which is inside of us, which is the monad. Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead, Peter.
In a way, you really can't have a science of aspiration or aspire towards anything unless you divide.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, when you complete the circle, you're in this very rich field of potentiality, and I guess it's the same as the Buddhist idea of right view, path, and fruition. The view is basically emptiness, but it's also extremely full.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I embrace at this point in my life, and of course it's an ongoing process, but the tremendous gratitude for that, for projection, for the principle of division. You know, it's like in the philosophy of number, two-ness is seen as evil. It's the number of separation and dividing. You've dropped away from God, the one. And yet, we don't have any way of getting to that awareness except to do projection. So we have to really work it, embrace it, which means looking at our shadow, looking at what we temporarily affix outside of ourselves, and then choose to bring it back in order to find the part of us that is in identification with one, with the essence, with power, with the monad, with the spiritual aspect, with integrity within ourselves. All right, going once, going twice. Maybe we're done. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lawson. It's always a living experience with Lawson.